Welcome to China Manufacturing Decoded from Sofeast, the podcast where we take you through the major news and topics facing importers and manufacturers in China and Asia today. Hi, welcome along to the podcast again. Adrian from the Sofeast team here, and I'm joined by a repeat guest, someone that's been on before, a very experienced product designer, Andy Bartlett. Andy, thanks for coming on again.
Well, thank you for the fanfare. I was hoping for a round of applause.
Maybe I can edit one in. But I mentioned you've been on before, and to everybody listening, I mean, I'll add some of the links to Andy's former appearances on the podcast, but it's really great to get somebody with your experience on, because we're trying to enrich the way that people are getting advice through this podcast. And we're going to be talking about the best practices and tools used when doing the industrial design of hardware products.
Yeah, sure.
So just before we get started, for anybody that hasn't heard you on the pod before, could you just give a very quick self-intro, please?
Yeah, sure. I'm approaching 50 and I worked all my life in product development. So product is a passion of mine, product design is a passion of mine, and industrial design is a passion of mine. So I've worked in various industries, including the toy industry, consumer electronics, mobile phones. Gosh, the list goes on and on. And I've picked up a few tips and tricks along the way. It'd be hard not to have done. And I'm always happy to share my thoughts and learn myself in the process. So that's me, 25 years or so designing products, and currently self-employed doing that for a whole variety of different industries in the US, Australia, and in Europe.
Great. Well, that's a heck of a CV. So really happy to have you on again, Andy. You're the expert here. So to get started, tell me more about industrial design, please.
In terms of industrial design, I think probably jumping in and thinking about what the bare bones of what industrial design is, and what it means, and how we can, as designers, influence, shape, and drive it forwards. It's an interesting topic because the process is subtly different across sectors and across product owners. And industrial design invokes a lot of passion and a lot of subjective opinion. And so as an industrial designer, part of our job is to, as I say, to drive that forward, to lead creatively, but also to respond to our clients and to their needs and our customers. So it's a role where there are no rights and wrongs, and so an interesting space that can evoke passions often, particularly around colour, and so it's often very challenging, I would say, and often the thing that many people get hung up on and fixated on, particularly the consumer, because if you're in a marketplace where in a crowded marketplace or a mature marketplace for technology, industrial design can be, hugely important, not only to differentiate you in the marketplace, but also to attract the attention of your potential consumers. So, that's kind of in a nutshell what it is, according to me, and according to how I've done it over the years.
Sure, and you mentioned sort of how subjective these things can be.
Yeah.
It just adds to the complexity of the whole pre-production process that we're going through when we've got a new product. And of course, product design is probably at an earlier stage of that in general, but it's not something to be taken lightly. And it's definitely, I think Renault said before a number of times on the podcast and in written content, a lot of startups or small, medium enterprises, entrepreneurs, people like that, they really underestimate all of the work required to even get to the point when you're ready to start production. And that very much includes the industrial design side of things, doesn't it?
Absolutely. So you can engage in industrial design at all different points in the development process. which again is another interesting thing, because on season 2, 3, and 4 you can refresh with new colors or new decoration or something like that. So it's one that you can jump in on at all different stages. Typically, I suppose from a designer's perspective, the best place to jump in is at the beginning. So when you're looking at concept, and at that stage, you can really shape the product. No pun intended. You can really influence direction. So and also bring creative and a creative approach, and challenge sort of preconceived ideas about what the solution to the problem you're trying to fix actually is. The other thing that's quite interesting as an industrial designer, one hat to wear when designing is not to be too, or to know when to become detailed and involved in detail, and how things may go together to achieve the look that you want, but also to know when not to be too concerned, and to, if you like, create a vision that you have some ideas about how you can achieve it, but maybe not all the answers just yet. And that's an interesting balance to strike, actually, not to push too hard so that the product isn't realizable and you can't create the product experience that you're shooting for, but also not to be too constrained. And different customers and different products will have different requirements for that. Some will want to be very out there and esoteric. Others will want to be quite narrow and channeled. And so that you can see there's different hats to wear in the creative process, and can jump in right at the beginning or literally right at the end.
Okay, makes sense. Yeah, that's good. So, as I mentioned at the top of this, we're looking at tools. Now, I'm assuming when we're talking about tools, we are going to be talking about hardware, software, things like this. So to start, what's your first item?
Probably the pencil and paper is the best place to start, where you can be super quick, super agile. You can explore ideas and shut ideas down quickly, and communicate with the customer, whoever the customer is. It might be, your boss. It might be your client. It might be your consumer. So using 2D, which eventually includes drawing in Illustrator or something similar, drawing with lines rather than in 3D. And it's a very powerful tool, actually. And oftentimes people with product design backgrounds go to 3D far too quickly. Whilst obviously there's the absolute right time to do that, if you go too early, you can slow yourself down. You can stifle the creative process. So my first tool to pick up is definitely the pencil, because and the sketchbook. And in fact, carrying a notebook around is probably a really good habit to foster, because you never know when inspiration comes. And as in all creative processes, often it's less on demand and more ideas percolate and bubble away and come to you after initial planting of seeds, if you like. So that's the first tool for sure. And like I say, you can actually get some really lovely results, both in terms of color and form, and user interface. Just doing it in 2D, and then move towards 3D later on. Now, industrial designers, you can also choose the wrong 3D tool. So associative modelers like Creo or SolidWorks or Autodesk, they can often be engineering focused and require too many parameters being tied down, requires too much associativity in the model. And so you might be better off using a simpler surface modeling package like Rhino is a good one. Alias is another one. And you don't have to worry about models rebuilding because you're just basically hacking away at lumps of material to make it look right. So the flow is definitely pencil, and then into Illustrator, and then into a surface or a solid model. Of course, once you've modeled in 3D, you can then also create some cool renderings, some cool simulations using a rendering package as well. So, but the further each step you take along that chain, the more time heavy and the slower you're going to get. So, just a word of caution, choose the right tool for the right time, and don't be frightened of going back a couple of steps and going back and sketching again. Often many problems can be solved more efficiently in 2D than 3D, that's for sure.
That's interesting. And I suppose when you've got a new product idea and you're looking for, let's say, a design house or an industrial designer like yourself to work with, this is the sort of advice they're going to be giving you, right? And so yeah. I think that willingness to take a step back, that's important, because I suppose it's about focusing on the right tool at the right time, and the strengths of those, they differ, don't they? You mentioned when you've got into 3D, I suppose you're not going to be able to go into, an early prototyping stage before you've gone quite far down into the 3D drawing phase and everything.
Well, cardboard, paper, cardboard models, prototype paper, they're pretty good. Yeah, I mean, don't be frightened of going in and mocking stuff up in the workshop, or knocking stuff together. You can very quickly do enough to excite someone's thoughts on a certain mechanism or a certain way something looks. It's very possible to do it with very low tech skills, actually. And not needing to, but you're right. If you want to do a 3D print or something, then you need to have made that investment up front in your data. But again, don't underestimate the power of simple.
Yeah, that reminds me. I think was it not Dyson who built basically a cardboard Hoover in his workshop with it? I think it had the motor and everything, but the sort of mechanism and design of it was made of cardboard or something, just to make sure that it worked.
Yeah, he notoriously made 2,000 prototypes before he actually had a working model, product. I don't think that's necessarily indicative of a good design process, and it may just be legend as well. But just somewhere between 1 and I don't know 10 would probably be what you're shooting for.
Okay. So as we move on, you've discussed the difference between going from 2D to 3D.
Yeah.
Next, can we talk about finishes and the finishing of products?
Sure. Yeah. So typically, industrial design is broken down into, or referred to as CMF. That's C for color, M for material, F for finish. So we've perhaps looked at the form, but now we need to think about those three things.
Okay.
Often it is considered as an afterthought, which is often a mistake as well, because if you think about without going into too much detail when you're designing, you will be thinking about materials. You'll be thinking about how they feel in the hand, whether they're hot, whether they're cold, smooth. Whether you've got the functional parameters as well, such as strength or drop toughness or heat resistance, anything like that. You would have thought about materials inherently in the design process. So coming to finishes, well, that's going to be in some sense determined by the base material that you're going to be finishing. That will drive it to some extent, but it's really good to, I would say, as an industrial designer, to have a really deep understanding of finishing and what's possible, because through working within the limitations of a process will really allow you to get the best from it. And knowing the limitations of the process will allow you to only propose things that are actually achievable, and B, actually save a lot of time and frustration. I share a little story. I've been involved in a product recently using an anodized finish. Now, anodizing of aluminium uses a dye process to colour the top coat of the aluminium, and the colours are almost infinite what you can achieve. And we swapped processes and moved to an electroplating and assumed that would be the same. It's a different chemical process, but the colours in electroplating are vastly reduced due to the chemistry and physics, actually. So we had to go and because we'd sold in a lovely range of colours and the customer really wanted them, we had to go and find another process which is 3 times more expensive, and it's actually vacuum electroplating, and is much more niche and hard to source. So we learned, that was probably I could have, if I'd known more information about the processes that I was discussing with the client, could have saved a lot of time and frustration on everyone's part, actually, and cost on the bill of materials as well. So if you are an industrial designer and it's make it your business to know, if you can, go and visit suppliers, go and find out what people can do, go and find out what the process is capable of, and you can do that on from a desktop, of course. But going to suppliers and touching and feeling stuff is really important, because you get, you can really sense how the light bounces off the surface with different materials and different textures. So yeah, roll your sleeves up and get practical, I would say, for sure.
Is it the same with industrial designers as with manufacturers, in that certain of you guys specialize in very specific types of products, for example, and therefore, that knowledge is already sort of locked in?
Yeah, for sure. In fact, I think the best industrial designers are actually those that move around different sectors and bring and cross-pollinate, if you like, those ideas. The automotive industry is really, really good for what the supply chain going to automotive industry is really good. So people industrial designers working in the automotive industry are exposed to the sharpest of ends. And so work for even furniture design, that's interesting in some of the wood effects and the finishes that are used there, and ceramics. Beyond the sort of hub of the core processes, I would say you're right. Different sectors have different strengths, and so sort of looking at all of them is also a really, really healthy, approach. And also, going to choosing a supplier that may be working in the automotive industry might be a really smart move. If you're doing a consumer electronics product, you might find that their costs are high, or their MOQs are high, but definitely worth going in, because you can learn stuff and try and maybe even copy a process that's not accessible to you because of its, because the volumes are too high, the costs are too high. You might be able to get somewhere close using a different alternative process that's lower cost and lower investment. And actually, on that point, one of the things I wanted to say is to sometimes, as an industrial designer, you are creating. You can't be too precious with your creations, and at a certain point, commercial decisions are made. So there's no shame in compromising and adjusting and flexing and pivoting according to what a supplier can achieve, or how easily a certain finish that you're asking for may or may not be achievable. Often, a really good starting place, actually, and I've worked like this before, is when a manufacturing process has been tied down, is actually going to a electroplater or an anodizer, and actually seeing what they do. And the path of least resistance will often be using an existing process or an existing color. They'll love you for it because you're going to cause them no headaches till they know this. They know they can do that color or that finish or that metal coating or whatever it is. They can do it. They know how to do it. You don't have to develop it. Easy, and they'll love you for that. When you go in with a shopping list as long as your arm, and none of which they've done before, you then start to kind of stress and strain the relationship and test, how much they are prepared to do to get your business. So, in summary, don't be frightened of compromising, albeit protecting the work that you've done and your aspirations. There is often a time to be pragmatic with that and to work with the tools that are in front of you and available to you.
So let's say that I'm ready to progress with the design and development of my new product, and I'm trying to engage with an industrial designer. What sort of information would you say I need to be providing?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. There are many different types of clients out there. That someone may have a product idea and have a really, really clear idea about what's going on inside, a really, really clear idea about function, and no idea about form. Absolutely none. And someone might go, well, I vaguely want it to do this, but I really love this product. I love that, and that's what I want. So they might be more visually biased in their makeup and their character. So and so you respond, as I said to you at the top of the podcast here, that your role as an industrial designer is to really flex around what the customer and the client wants. So if they want creative lead, and they want you to, then do that. If they want to use you as a way of expressing the ideas that they have themselves, then do that. Because and maybe try and add some more on top, so that you add more value. But when I talk to a client, first up, I try and understand what the landscape of what they've got in their mind. So what do they know about the product? What do they think about the product? And what do they expect to see? I always ask them if they admire any brands, or they have any other pre-existing brands or products or objects or stuff that they like and that they like to see reflected in. And often they won't, but they'll think and come back and then give you some information which will help you clarify. So asking them, if you could put your product under an umbrella of another brand that's out there already, what would it be and why? So that's a good question. And also is to set the parameters about how much exploration they want. Some people might just go, well, I just want to see one concept and be satisfied. But some people will be more adventurous and go, well, I'd like to see something, maybe in this area here and something, and have and end up with like sort of 5, 6, 7 different concepts. And want to see them, but of course, the more stuff that's required, the longer it's going to take, and so on and so forth. So, really understand early doors what is in the client's mind, and if you don't think what's in their mind is realistic, that's absolutely fine. And you can say, "Hey, in my experience, that kind of thing is you're going to want this," and then most people go, "Hey, okay, well, you're the expert. Yeah, that's fine." So, but start off coaxing it out. But of course, you're going to want to need to know roughly the selling cost. You're going to want to know roughly, the core function. They may have some idea about build, they may not. Materials, they may not. And I suppose the factory in which they're going to make it. That might be in the bag already, and it might not. And if that is in the bag, then it's great to reach out to your production engineers, your design engineers, to find out what their expertise and what they're likely to want to achieve. And then once you've got that information, again, I go back to it, you are a creative lead. Predominantly your role is to be creative and to stretch and to explore. So gather the information, know where you're starting from, but then don't be frightened of pushing and going, suggesting routes that maybe they didn't have in their mind.
Yeah, it's just such an interesting topic. I think being able to understand, the different expectations and give that advice based on what you're hearing from them. But in some cases, they may have no real idea how the product needs to look sort of aesthetically, just more the function of it. It's just so broad and so exciting, right?
Yeah, it is. It definitely exciting is the word. If you don't get excited about it, then you shouldn't be doing it, because it can be tough, but very, very, very rewarding. Yeah, as is any sort of exploration into the unknown, and that's what you're doing. The whole product development is normally an exploration into the unknown, which is can be often scary actually as well. If you don't know how you're going to achieve something, or can be daunting. And as someone who doesn't do this every day, I imagine it's actually bamboozling, because, where do you start? Is it chicken and egg? How do you start? How do you start? So I guess to walking someone through that is part of your skill. An industrial designer isn't just as with every job. You have to nurture relationships. You have to nurture relationships. You have to nurture trust. You have to nurture good communication. You have to be, those are as important as your hard skills. Your technical and your creative ability.
Yeah,
they need to be mixed with this kind of ability to lead and walk someone through, and also be responsive and reactive to their requirements as they change, because they will.
Yeah, and actually that reminds me, in former episodes that you've done with us, you've mentioned this before, the importance of relationship building and nurturing. And I suppose, especially when you're part of a big sort of team process as an industrial designer, if you've been brought on to kick off that exploration of the product and to bend it into a shape where, it's ready for prototyping, validation, and then production, you're sort of, at the head of a long line of different teams that are going to be working on this thing, right?
Oh, for sure. I mean, you're absolutely right. You'll definitely straddle engineering, production, quality, marketing, sales. You will be talking. Yeah, everyone of those in those disciplines will be listening to what you say and have an opinion on what you say. Not so much if you say, for example, working on quality or safety. People tend to switch off a little bit, but those guys will be energized. Well, the engineering guys and the production guys will be energized because they've got to make the thing. The marketing team are going to be energized because they've got to, it's got to be in line with their brand values and talk to the consumer in the way that they want their product to do. And then so everyone has an opinion, which is it's a blessing and a curse, I suppose.
Speaking about the different sort of departments, engineering, marketing, all of the people that come together, oftentimes people are working with suppliers who are abroad, let's say China, Vietnam, India, wherever.
Sure.
If you're engaged on a project which is, global, how is that interplay between you and these different suppliers? Let's take China as an example. What are the sort of common issues you found when trying to work with, a client that might be in America, but you're in the UK, and then the supplier who's doing the production, maybe they're doing prototyping and stuff as well, they're actually in China. What sort of tips or what sort of issues have you encountered that you can share?
Yeah. Okay, so that's become very difficult in the last 2 years when we can't travel. like we used to be able to. Because if you're fortunate enough to be able to go to physically go to the supplier and have that meeting and seeing the process, and there's just literally nothing beats that. You understand the limitations much better, and you can see what they're doing, and can see the potential limitations and the benefits of what they're doing. So it used to be that going, you could not substitute, there was no substitute for going. So again, so that's not possible now, not for now, but it is about building relationships. And so whatever you can do to nurture that with the supplier, either that's through directly or through a development house or some intermediate that offers you the introduction and can go to the factory visit with you. That's everything that you can do to be a model customer will pay dividends. So this means kind of doing as much work before you go to the supplier as you can. Really try and tie down colours. And if you've got options, which you often will, or uncertainty, going with 20 different colorways is just not going to be well received. So being as efficient as you can, knowing that people, color will change, finish will change, or regularly does change. But just to be as kind of organized and as informed as you can will certainly help your case in light of not being able to go there and not being able to do meet in the flesh and to see you, and that's my own advice. It's become tougher for sure.
Yeah, well, you mentioned understanding the suppliers, capabilities or maybe capacity. I mean, in the context of COVID, when travel, especially to China, is difficult, if a supplier has been audited, like a technical audit or something, would that be something that an industrial designer like yourself would benefit from seeing and understanding?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. So just seeing the process on video, images, and that sort of thing is great. Often a finish, someone who's doing, let's say, electroplating will have a swatch book, which is a collection of standard finishes that they do. Now, again, you can't beat that. That's another good little tip. If you are engaging with a supplier, is to try and get hold of a swatch book with little chips in that have small squares of finish for you to see. And again, going back to it, if you can pick off of that list, they'll love you.
Oh yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, and be much more willing to sample, your parts or whatever. That just makes their life easy. So that may not prove practical all the time because maybe it's not close enough. But if it's close, you really should consider that as an option for sure.
Absolutely. Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today, Andy. Thank you again for coming on. That's been a really fascinating look into, I suppose we can say, best practices and some of the tools used, when we're looking at industrial design of hardware products. So, thanks again for joining me.
Hey, the pleasure to chat.
And hopefully not the last time. It's not the first time, but hopefully not the last time either. Thanks again for listening to this podcast, brought to you by the Sofeast Group. We're on a mission to provide you with everything you need to manufacture effectively in Asia, including inspections, auditing, new product development support, contract manufacturing, 3PL warehousing and fulfillment, and much, much more across Asia's key manufacturing areas. Visit us at sofeast.com, that's SOFEAST.com, to learn more and get help. If you've enjoyed the podcast today, please do rate, review and share because it will really help others discover us too.